My name is Lily Harper, and I've spent the last 12 years working as a trauma nurse at St. Matthew's Hospital in a small Virginia town where everyone knows your name and your secrets. I've seen car crashes, gunshot wounds, overdoses, and the kind of silent heartbreak that never makes it to the medical charts. People think trauma is loud, that it screams and bleeds. But the truth is, the worst wounds are the quiet ones, the ones that sit behind steady smiles and polite answers. I've spent years stitching up other people's pain, never realizing how unhealed my own would become. My husband, Ethan Harper, is 36, a freelance photojournalist who chases truth for a living. He's the kind of man who finds beauty in chaos, who believes that even the darkest moments deserve to be seen. I used to watch him through his camera lens, wondering how someone could be so steady while the world burned around him. Together we made sense, my need to mend, his need to witness. We were a pair built on faith, both devout Catholics, both certain that love and purpose would be enough to carry us through anything. When we married, we promised to build a home filled with laughter, faith, and children. We waited, as our church taught us to, and when the waiting ended, joy poured in all at once. Our first son, Noah, came with his father's curiosity and my calm. Then came Lucas, our storyteller, always turning life into a game. Mia, our youngest, is all sunshine and mischief. And then there was Ava, our second child, the one whose curls danced in the wind, whose laughter could melt the hardest day. She would be 5 today. Our lives weren't perfect, but they were whole. Mornings were pancakes and chaos. Evenings were bedtime prayers whispered between tiny giggles. Ethan's photos lined our hallway. My hospital badge hung by the door. We were living the dream we'd prayed for, rooted in love, surrounded by faith, and watched over by the quiet rhythm of small-town life. I used to think I understood pain. I used to believe that with enough compassion and patience, every wound could heal. But that was before the day my world split open. Before I learned that some wounds don't bleed, and the deepest ones are carved by words. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. It was one of those crisp autumn days that looks almost too perfect to belong to real life. The air was gold and soft, the trees along Meadowview Park brushed with red and amber. I remember how the light fell through the branches, how the wind carried the smell of wood smoke and wet leaves. I had taken the kids there because the house felt too quiet, too heavy. After Mia's birth, silence had become unbearable. Every pause felt like it might swallow me whole. Mia was only 3 months old then, tiny and perfect, asleep in her stroller wrapped in a pink blanket. Lucas chased Noah across the field, both of them laughing, their sneakers kicking up dirt. And Ava, my sweet, bright-eyed girl, ran circles around the bench where I sat. She had just turned 4. Her curls bounced like tiny halos, her voice filled the air with that pure, ringing joy only children carry. But inside me, everything was blurred. The doctor had told me I was lucky, that the hysterectomy had saved my life after they found the malignant tumor on my ovary during Mia's delivery. They'd cut away the cancer, but they'd taken my womb too. It was the right decision medically, I knew that. But every time I looked at my children, a quiet grief pressed against my chest. The grief of finality, of knowing there would never be another. I was supposed to feel grateful. Instead, I felt broken in ways no scalpel could reach. That day at the park, I tried to be present. I tried to smile when Ethan texted a photo from his latest assignment, a sunrise over the Chesapeake Bay. "Almost home," he'd written. I wanted to tell him I was doing better, that the fog was lifting. But even as I typed, my mind wandered. Mia stirred in the stroller, and I turned to adjust her blanket. It was just a moment, a single heartbeat of distraction. Then came the scream. Ava's voice, sharp, terrified, small. I looked up and saw the ball rolling toward the street, her little legs chasing after it. The sound that followed will live in me forever. The screech of tires, the thud, the silence that came after. My body moved before thought could. I was running, my lungs burning, my hands trembling. A man yelled something, someone called 911. but I could only hear the wind and the faint rattle of my own heartbeat in my ears. Ava was lying on the pavement, her curls matted with blood, her chest barely moving. I pressed my hands to her, whispering her name over and over, as if repetition could call her back. "It's Mommy, baby. I'm here. Stay with me." My nurse training kicked in automatically, compressions, rescue breaths, control the bleeding, but my mind was gone. The world had narrowed to her face, her half-open eyes, her still warm hand in mine. The ambulance arrived, lights flashing against the fading sky. Ethan reached the hospital minutes after us, still wearing his camera strap around his neck. When the surgeon told us they'd do everything they could, I clung to that phrase like it was scripture. Everything they could. But 6 hours later, Ava was gone. There's no way to describe the sound that came from Ethan's chest when they told us. It wasn't crying. It was something deeper, primal, as if his soul had been ripped in half. I remember holding him, both of us collapsing to the floor, while the world moved on around us. Machines beeping, nurses walking past, life continuing in its cruel indifference. The days that followed were a blur of casseroles, flowers, and whispered condolences. I barely remember the funeral, only the weight of the small white coffin, and the way Noah held Lucas's hand, trying to be brave. I wanted to tell them it was okay to cry, but the words wouldn't come. Ethan tried to be strong. He was the calm in every storm, the quiet center of our chaos. But at night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd hear him in the hallway, whispering to Ava's photo. "I should have been there," he'd say. And I'd lie there, eyes open in the dark, thinking the same thing. Our grief didn't drive us apart, but it changed us. He grew quieter, his eyes heavier. I grew restless, haunted by every moment I could have done differently. The guilt was a living thing, a shadow that followed me everywhere. 5 months later, summer had crept back in, bright and cruel in its normalcy. Ethan's sister, Cassandra, called to invite us to a family barbecue at her home in Richmond. She said it might help us move on. I wanted to refuse, but Ethan thought it could be good for the kids, to see their cousins, to feel something close to joy again. Cassandra was everything I wasn't: elegant, assertive, always immaculate. Where I wore scrubs and carried exhaustion, she wore silk and confidence. She ran a successful real estate firm, drove a luxury SUV, and posted pictures of her perfect family online. Her husband, Marcus, was different. Steady, kind, and once a close friend of mine. We'd studied together in college before life carried us in different directions. He was the kind of man who could make you laugh in the middle of a breakdown, but over the years, he'd grown quieter, almost timid, as if Cassandra's fire had burned away his edges. We arrived just after noon. The lawn was spotless, the pool glittering under the sun. Cassandra's twins, Zoe and Liam, were already splashing around, shouting to their cousins. Ethan's parents were there too, Claire and Tom. Sweet people who meant well but avoided confrontation at all costs. There were hugs, smiles, and that awkward politeness that always hangs over family gatherings after tragedy. For a while it almost felt normal. Marcus grilled burgers, Claire poured lemonade, and the kids chased bubbles across the grass. Then Cassandra's voice cut through the air, bright and sharp. "Lily, you look tired. You really should take more time for yourself. Grief can age you, you know." Her tone was honeyed, but the sting was unmistakable. I forced a smile, swallowing the hurt. I'd learned to let her comments slide, for the sake of peace. Later, the kids moved to the art station near the pool, painting paper and balloons. I turned my back for a few minutes, helping Mia with her snack. When I looked again, our new SUV was splattered in neon paint. Pink, green, and yellow streaks dripping down the hood. The twins laughed, their hands covered in color. I walked over calmly, crouched to their level. "Hey, sweethearts, painting the car isn't a game, okay? Let's clean this up together." My tone was gentle but firm. It wasn't anger, just a lesson in respect. That's when Cassandra appeared, her heels clicking across the patio. "Excuse me? You have no right to discipline my children." "Cassandra," I said quietly, "they threw paint on the car. I'm just teaching them it's not okay." Her eyes flashed. "Your kids probably started it anyway. They've been acting out ever since." She paused, tilting her head with mock sympathy. "Well, you know." The crowd around us grew still. I could feel every gaze turn toward us. My stomach tightened, but I tried to stay calm. "That's not fair," I said. This isn't about sides, it's about accountability. She took a step closer, her perfume sharp in the heat. Accountability, she sneered. Maybe if you'd been better parents, Ava wouldn't be dead. The world went silent. I didn't breathe. Ethan froze beside me, his face pale as stone. Someone dropped a glass behind us, the sound shattering the stillness. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus muttered Cassandra's name like a warning, but she didn't stop. She just stood there, arms crossed, looking pleased with herself. My throat closed. I felt the sting of tears but refused to let them fall. Lucas clung to my leg. Noah stared at the ground. I gathered Mia in my arms, turned toward the car and said quietly, "We're leaving." Ethan's voice shook as he said, "Apologize." Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, she's overreacting. Just a car." Maybe if she weren't so obsessed with her perfect family image, she would have noticed Ava running into the street. Ethan lunged, rage breaking through grief, but Marcus and Uncle Greg grabbed him before he could reach her. The air was filled with shouting, but I heard none of it. I just kept walking, holding Mia tight, the other kids following. Behind me, I heard Claire whisper, "Please, let's keep the peace," her voice trembling. But peace had already died the day Ava did. And in that moment, standing by the car streaked with paint, surrounded by silence where love should have been, I realized something devastating. Sometimes family wounds deeper than any stranger ever could. In the days that followed the barbecue, the world grew strangely quiet. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the heavy kind that hums behind every closed door. No one called. No one came. The only sound was the echo of Cassandra's words looping endlessly in my mind. Maybe if you'd been better parents, Ava wouldn't be dead. Ethan stopped sleeping. I'd wake in the middle of the night and find him sitting on the porch, staring into the darkness, a mug of cold coffee forgotten in his hand. I knew he was replaying it all. Not just that moment, but every moment since Ava died. The way everyone froze. The way no one said a word in our defense. Grief had already taken our daughter. Now it seemed determined to take our family too. 3 days after the barbecue, Ethan's mother, Claire, called. Her voice was thin and trembling, every sentence wrapped in diplomacy. "Sweetheart," she said softly, she's pregnant and emotional." She didn't mean what she said. I stared at the phone, speechless. "She blamed us for our daughter's death, Claire. In front of our children." "I know," she whispered, "but we have to keep the peace. Families forgive." I almost laughed. "Peace?" I repeated. "Peace is what you ask for when you don't have the courage to confront cruelty." After that, she stopped calling too. Weeks passed. There was no apology, no sign of remorse. Only text messages from relatives, brief, cautious, always the same refrain. "Let it go. She's family. You'll regret making this bigger than it is." But it was already bigger than any of them understood. Ethan tried to stay composed for the kids, but I saw the anger in his jaw, the way his hand trembled when Cassandra's name came up. I started avoiding family gatherings altogether. When Noah asked why we couldn't see Zoe and Liam anymore, I didn't have an answer that made sense to a child. "Sometimes adults say things they shouldn't," I told him. "And we need some space." Then one afternoon, Noah came home from school holding a folded note. His eyes were wide, uncertain. "Aunt Rachel said I should give this to you," he murmured. I unfolded the paper and recognized the handwriting immediately. Small looping letters in pink ink. Zoe's letter. "Dear Aunt Lily and Uncle Ethan, Mom says you hate us now, but I miss you. Liam does too. We didn't mean to ruin your car. We thought it was funny, not bad. Please don't be mad at Mom anymore. I don't think she really hates you. I wish Ava was here. She was nice to us. Love, Zoe." By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. The words blurred through my tears. Zoe was just a child. Another casualty in Cassandra's war. I wanted to write back to tell her none of this was her fault, that we loved her and always would. But Ethan stopped me. "We can't, Lil," he said quietly. "If Cassandra finds out, she'll twist it." He was right. Every olive branch we'd offered had been snapped in half. 2 weeks later, things got worse. It was a Monday afternoon when I received a call from Mrs. Larson, the principal at Noah and Lucas's school. Her voice was firm but uneasy. "Mrs. Harper," she began, "there's been a situation. Your sister-in-law, Mrs. Cassandra Morgan, Arrived today insisting she was here to pick up your children for a family visit. My heart sank. What? She's not on the pickup list. I know, Mrs. Larson said. We refused to release them, but she caused quite a scene in the parking lot, shouting that you were keeping the cousins apart out of spite. We had to escort her off the property. By the time I arrived, the staff was still murmuring, the air thick with judgment. I could see teachers exchanging looks, the kind people give when they've already heard one side of the story. Cassandra had always known how to play the crowd. By the next morning, whispers had started in town. Parents avoided my gaze at drop-off. One even said, I heard there's some kind of custody drama in your family? It spread like wildfire, Cassandra's version of events, carefully spun to make her the victim of our cruelty. According to her, we were unstable, paranoid, still acting out our grief in destructive ways. And because Ethan's last name carried weight in our community, every rumor cut deeper. We thought it couldn't get worse. But then came the lawsuit. A thick envelope arrived by courier, formal, cold, heavy. Inside were papers stamped with legal insignia. Cassandra and Marcus Morgan versus Ethan and Lily Harper. The accusations: defamation, emotional distress, and alienation of family affection. They claimed our false public statements had caused Cassandra severe anxiety, especially during her pregnancy, leading to complications when her daughter Ivy was born prematurely. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, rereading the words until they stopped making sense. They're suing us, I whispered. Ethan looked up from across the room, his expression unreadable. For what? Telling the truth. He picked up the phone, called Marcus directly. The conversation was brief, sharp, and ended with Ethan slamming the receiver down. He says it's nothing personal, Ethan said bitterly. Just Cassandra protecting her reputation. It was surreal, the idea that the same people who'd watched us bury our daughter now wanted to destroy what was left of us. I called Rachel, Ethan's cousin, one of the few who had stood silently during the barbecue but whose eyes had brimmed with sympathy. She sighed. They're out of control, Lily. Everyone in the family's talking about it, but no one wants to get involved. They're afraid of Cassandra. We hired an attorney named Victoria Hayes, a woman whose confidence filled every room she entered. She was calm, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who didn't flinch in the face of chaos. After reading the complaint, she smiled faintly. This won't hold, she said. Truth is a defense. You didn't defame anyone. You repeated what she said. And there are witnesses. Still, the damage was done. Our names were now whispered in church pews and grocery aisles, people wondering if we'd really gone too far. Grief had already isolated us. Now gossip finished the job. Ethan's freelance contract slowed. Friends stopped inviting us to barbecues and birthday parties. Even at the hospital, I could feel the shift. Co-workers lowering their voices when I entered the break room. The lawsuit hearings dragged on for months, draining us emotionally and financially. Each time Cassandra appeared in court, she wore soft colors, her hairstyle just so, her pregnancy bump on full display, the picture of fragile motherhood. She dabbed her eyes when her lawyer mentioned cruel remarks and public humiliation. I'd sit there in silence, my hands clenched, watching her performance. No one mentioned Ava. No one mentioned the words that started it all. The turning point came unexpectedly. One gray November morning, Mrs. Callahan, our elderly next-door neighbor, showed up at our doorstep clutching her tablet. She was trembling with both nerves and outrage. I didn't mean to pry, she said, but I think you should see this. On the screen was a video, grainy but clear enough. Cassandra, standing at the end of our driveway 2 nights earlier, screaming. Her voice was unmistakable. You don't deserve to have children. You killed your own daughter. She was raging, waving her arms, while Marcus stood off to the side, looking exhausted. I had heard her that night but refused to step outside. Mrs. Callahan, who'd recorded the scene from her porch, had finally decided enough was enough. Ethan sent the video to Victoria. Within 24 hours, it was online. First shared by a local parenting forum, then spreading through Facebook groups, and finally picked up by a small Richmond news outlet. It went viral. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Commenters flooded the thread with anger and disbelief. This woman blamed grieving parents for their child's death? How could her family stand by? Screenshots of Cassandra's past social posts, mocking other relatives, belittling co-workers, began to surface. Then the most shocking post appeared. From Claire, Ethan's mother. On her Facebook page, under a photo of Ava's memorial, she wrote, "I failed my son and daughter-in-law by staying silent when cruelty was spoken. I thought silence was peace, but it was cowardice. I'm sorry." Within hours, her post had hundreds of comments. Family members, neighbors, even church members weighed in. Some apologized. Others admitted they believed Cassandra's lies. The Harper family's wall of denial finally cracked. Ethan cried that night for the first time since Ava's funeral, not out of sadness but relief. "Someone finally saw it," he said quietly. Finally. The lawsuit crumbled soon after. Cassandra's lawyers withdrew, citing irreconcilable reputational damage. Marcus tried to reach out privately, claiming he never agreed with her actions, but it was too late. Every mask had fallen. For the first time in months, our house felt still, not empty but peaceful. The gossip stopped. The phone rang again, this time with voices of support. Rachel came over with coffee and pie, hugging me tightly. "You were right to stand up," she said. "You were the only one who did." And though the wreckage around us was still smoldering, lawsuits, broken relationships, fractured trust, there was something clean in the ashes. Something honest. The truth had finally spoken for itself. The first Thanksgiving after the lawsuit ended didn't look like any Thanksgiving Lily had ever known. There was no crystal dishware, no carefully arranged table by Cassandra's standards, no photographs lined up to prove how perfect a family could look. Instead, there was Rachel's house, the small colonial on the edge of town with its uneven wooden floors, its kitchen that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon polish, and a crowd that felt like home. Rachel was a colleague from the hospital, a trauma nurse like Lily. Years earlier, when Lily had been drowning in postpartum depression, Rachel was the one who had quietly left meals on her porch. Now she hosted something she called Thanksgiving for family refugees. People estranged, exiled, or simply tired of pretending. There were widowers, foster kids, and divorced parents who shared custody and casseroles in equal measure. There were single nurses on call, firefighters between shifts, and a retired teacher who brought a pie for every person in the room. When Lily and Ethan walked in with the kids, the warmth hit them like sunlight after a long winter. No one asked awkward questions. No one whispered "poor Lily" behind her back. Instead, people just made space at the table, in the conversation, and in their hearts. Ethan carved the turkey, his hands steady again for the first time in months. Noah sat beside him, explaining robotics projects he'd started at school. Rachel's husband had found old parts from a discarded vacuum, and Noah had turned them into a walking robot named Tiny Ava. Lucas sat at the far end, reading aloud the first chapter of a story he was writing. A fantasy about a kingdom healed by a brave little girl with golden curls. Mia, their youngest, had paint on her fingers, proudly showing a watercolor she'd made of the sun shining through clouds. Each small moment stitched something back together. Community became medicine. That night, Lily stepped outside onto Rachel's porch. The air was cold, the kind of crisp that carries memory. She looked up at the stars and whispered Ava's name. Not with grief this time, but gratitude. Ethan joined her, wrapping a coat around her shoulders. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was sacred. Later that week, Claire, Ethan's mother, came by. She stood at the door like someone unsure if she still belonged. Her face looked older, but her eyes softer. She carried a small box of cinnamon rolls, the kind she used to bake when Ethan was little. "I chose wrong," she said simply. "I believed silence was peace, but it was cowardice. I'm here now if you'll have me." Lily didn't know what to say. The anger had long since burned away, leaving only tired ashes. So she just nodded. "Come in," she whispered. That was enough. From then on, Claire became a quiet presence, not trying to fix, just to be. She sat with the kids while Lily worked late. She helped Noah build his second robot. She read bedtime stories to Mia and listened to Lucas talk about his stories. She never mentioned Cassandra again, but once Lily caught her standing by the window, tears rolling silently as she watched the kids play outside. The legal resolution came quietly, like the closing of a long, painful book. Their lawyer, Victoria, called one morning. "It's over," she said. "The court finalized the no-contact agreement. Cassandra and Marcus can't contact you or the children." Lily didn't feel triumph, Only relief, the deep trembling kind that comes after too many sleepless nights. When she told Ethan, he simply nodded. "Good," he said. "Let's make peace our priority now." But peace, they learned, wasn't a single event, it was 1,000 small choices. Choosing not to answer a cruel message, choosing to walk away from gossip, choosing to plant new roots instead of digging through the ruins. They joined a grief support group at church, not just for Ava, but for everything they'd lost. The family they once believed in, the illusion of safety, the innocence that had burned away. Through it all, the house began to feel alive again. There were art supplies on the kitchen table, half-finished projects, and laughter echoing down the hallway. Lily learned to breathe deeply again. She still had nightmares sometimes, sirens, the sound of screeching tires, but they came less often. One night, after tucking the kids in, she found Ethan sitting by the piano with an old photo in his hands. It was Ava, sitting in the grass at Meadowview Park, holding a dandelion. He looked up and said softly, "Do you think she knows we're okay?" Lily placed a hand on his shoulder. "I think she's the reason we are." For the first time he smiled, not the forced kind but one that reached his eyes. The pain would never disappear completely, but they no longer needed it to. Grief had become part of their love story, not its shadow. On what would have been Ava's 5th birthday, they drove to the small cemetery near the church. The morning sun filtered through the autumn leaves, scattering gold across the grass. The children each carried something for her. Noah had daisies, Lucas had a letter, Mia had one of her watercolor paintings. Ethan carried a toy camera, a small plastic one Ava had once adored, pretending to be like her father. They knelt together by her stone, which read simply, "Ava Grace Harper, forever our light." Lily read her letter aloud. Her voice wavered but didn't break. "You taught me how to see love even in loss. You are still here in every kindness, every sunrise, every gentle hand that reaches out." The kids placed their gifts one by one. Lucas's letter was folded into a paper star. Mia's painting showed a smiling son holding hands with a little girl in a pink dress. Then came a surprise, an envelope tucked beneath a bouquet already there. It was addressed in a child's handwriting, to Aunt Lily and Uncle Ethan. Inside was a short note written in blue crayon. "Mom says you hate us, but I don't think that's true. I miss you. I'm sorry for what Mom said about Ava. I hope we can see you again someday. Love, Zoe." Lily pressed the letter to her chest. Ethan looked away, blinking hard. It was a message of hope, not absolution but a doorway opening just a crack. Later, they learned from a neighbor that Cassandra and Marcus had divorced. The tension, the lies, the lawsuits, it had all caught up. Marcus had quietly moved out, leaving Cassandra to face the fallout of her own bitterness. Lily didn't feel joy or vengeance, only a quiet, bittersweet peace. As they walked back to the car, Noah slipped his hand into his mother's. "Mom," he asked softly, "do you think Ava can see us?" Lily looked at the sky, the soft sweep of clouds, the way the light shimmered through. "I think she's right there," she said. "In every bit of warmth we feel." That night, Lily lit a candle on their kitchen table. Around it, she placed the children's drawings, the letter from Zoe, and the little toy camera. The flame flickered gently, casting golden light across their faces. She looked at her family, Ethan, Noah, Lucas, and Mia, and realized something she hadn't been able to before. Family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes it's the ones who show up when the world walks away. Ava's absence would always ache, but her presence had changed them. Because of her, they had learned compassion deeper than words. Because of her, they'd found courage to let go of people who couldn't love kindly. Because of her, they discovered that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with love and loss side by side. As the candle burned lower, Lily whispered, "Happy birthday, my girl." Outside, a gentle wind brushed the trees, scattering a few petals from the daisies they brought home. The house was quiet but alive, filled with stories, laughter, forgiveness, and the faint eternal glow of Ava's light. Lily's voice came through softly, steady as a heartbeat, no longer trembling, no longer weighed down by pain, but shaped by it. "I used to believe silence was the same as peace," she said. "But I've learned that silence enables cruelty. The moment we stop speaking up, we give permission for others to keep hurting us. And sometimes the people we love most become the ones we need to stand against." She paused, her tone gentler now. Grief reveals who truly loves you. When our world broke, the ones who stayed didn't have to fix anything. They just held space for our pain. Real love doesn't look away from brokenness. It kneels beside it. The next truth came like a quiet revelation. Boundaries are not betrayal, they're survival. It took me years to understand that saying no more isn't cruelty. It's courage. It's teaching others how to treat you. And teaching yourself that peace is worth protecting. Her voice grew warm, resolute. And forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. I can forgive someone and still close the door. Healing doesn't require reunion. It requires honesty. Finally, she smiled softly, her words carrying the calm of acceptance. And perhaps the most powerful lesson of all. True family is chosen, not imposed. It's built by love, not obligation. By kindness, not control. The people who see your pain and stay, those are the ones you build your life around. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every story reminds us that healing begins when we stop excusing cruelty and start protecting peace. Tell me in the comments, would you cut ties with family to save your peace?